Good afternoon, everybody. Or good afternoon again, I should rather say. Usually people start and they say they've got good news and bad news. Well, I've only got good news for you. And the good news is you'll only listen to me for 2 minutes because I have to make up for the time that I lost with the earlier panel. And then Milena, as Willie mentioned, will take you through some of the more detailed issues around our instruments that pertain to customs reform and modernization in the World Customs Organization. Now, I've got 3 slides that I've prepared that focus on the key policies that drive customs, not only in Southern Africa, but globally when it comes to modernization. And I think the first one, and it would be amiss not to mention this again, is our policy on customs in the 21st century. This is a policy that was developed in 2008 by the collective membership of the WCO, and what it is built on is a good understanding of what's happening in the international trade landscape, the different drivers, whether it's multilateral trade negotiations taking place in Geneva at the World Trade Organization, or regional trade agreements, or bilateral free trade agreements, the security situation that we are confronted with, the compliance issues that we have around revenue and other issues, and a good understanding of that landscape. How does it impact on customs around the world, and how do we, as customs administrations, have to respond to these challenges? Now, it's very clear from a customs perspective what guides us, what the policies are. What I would like to very briefly reflect on for 2 minutes would be, but how do we get there? You know, how do we close this gap between lofty sounding policies and visions and strategies and, you know, noble aspirations to actually getting traction on the ground, making things happen, moving towards execution and results? And the one thing that I would like to highlight here is the issue that was raised by the colleague from the business chamber in Swaziland. It's the issue of political will and commitment. You cannot emphasize that enough. A second issue would, of course, be ownership. And it cannot be an imported solution. It cannot be a donor-driven or an international organization that drives change in a country when you're talking about modernization. It has to be owned by the administration. That is when you see things moving forward. Then also the issue of partnerships. And I don't mean partnerships at a high level. I'm talking about real partnerships such as those that we heard about this morning that exist in places like Mozambique and in Ghana, where you have real collaboration to understand what are the problems, where are we moving, and how do we get these issues fixed. It's about an holistic approach. We spoke a lot this morning and a little bit this afternoon around interconnectivity, about technology. And I think we all recognize, look, technology is here and it has already started changing government and certainly customs, and it's very important. But it's not the only issue that we need to think about. It's very much tied to issues around policy, process, as well as people. And what I would like to do is to stray a little bit from the script, because you'll see I've got a number of issues here on the slide, some of the lessons learned. Many of them were picked up this morning. I'm not going to even read them again. They're in the deck. But I would like to focus on one issue, and that's around people. When we bring technology into our modernization programs, it does tend to become a very important focus point, and it should, because it is a very strong enabler. But we should never forget about the investment that we need to make in our people. Because once we introduce technology, we change our operating models, we change the places where our people should be, the tasks that they do, and we don't always invest enough in taking our people with us, in redeploying them, in retraining them, reskilling them, or sometimes making some really hard decisions whether we actually, after modernization, need all the people that we need anymore. So the message is that as we modernize, as we bring in technology, do not forget about the investment we need to make in our people. It's about the people. And it's not only for the customs administrations, it's for business, because where we bring in new systems, although we like to make them very friendly and very easy to operate, the fact is it's something new. We need to manage the change, and we need to make sure that our people from both within the administration as well as the private sector actually move with us when we go down that path. So this investment in the people as we invest in technology is so important. A final issue around people that I want to mention is very often when we change our business processes, bring in new technology, what we fail to appreciate sometimes is the capabilities that we require both in customs as well as in business have also changed. So as we introduce the new technology, we also need to make sure that the right capabilities for people exist in our administrations. It's fantastic to have a single window, interconnectivity, but do we have the right people now to actually operate those systems? People who understand data warehousing, data management, risk analysis, writing risk rules. So those are the new capabilities that we need to look at as we modernize our administrations as well. And from a WCO perspective, just in conclusion, we've invested over the past 2-3 years quite a bit in actually understanding how does modernization change our operating models in customs as well as the capabilities that are required when we actually go through these changes. And then just finally, the few issues that I want to mention there is the last one. And that is, you know, we always ask ourselves, why are we not where we want to be in world rankings? How do we move up? And the reality is that when you talk about change, it does take time. You need to do it properly, but what we also need to do is to celebrate success. And I think this morning we've heard some success stories on the modernization front in our region, and I think that is something that we all should be proud of. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it from my side. I'm handing over to Milena. Thank you.
Good afternoon again to everyone. I would like to start by saying that this year the WCO has started a new initiative, which we can actually call a modernization initiative. And I think it very well corresponds to the name and the title of this conference, which is actually increasing economic competitiveness by implementing trade facilitation tools, because this is actually exactly what the WCO was aiming at when starting this initiative. We've heard about the single window and about interconnectivity this morning, and these are some of the ways of improving trade facilitation and the ways in which customs administrations can contribute to economic competitiveness. However, there are other ways that we can do that. Just to give you some background information on how this initiative had started and what had actually triggered it. First of all, I would like to say the economic uncertainty due to ongoing global financial crisis is one of the things that triggered, should I say, opportunities and challenges for customs to react quickly in this situation. Furthermore, we have the WTO negotiations and the trade facilitation negotiations that will one day, should I say, be concluded. That is when the WCO will be expected to support its member administrations in implementing them. And of course, regional integration is very important. Its importance is growing because the economies and the states are seeing this as a way of increasing economic growth. And of course, the WCO is asked in that regard to help, should I say, states. As we know, inefficient and slow customs procedures and border procedures altogether can hinder regional integration. So what the customs community and the WCO have seen as an opportunity to help in that regard is, we can see here on the screen a few of those elements. First of all, promoting and further implementing existing WCO tools, and first and foremost, the revised Kyoto Convention. But of course, there are many other instruments and tools that have been developed by the WCO and are out there. However, they are not being implemented widely enough. Another thing is the WCO and its members can contribute to enhancing cooperation between all, should I say, crucial or key players in cross-border movements. That is the customs, other border agencies, but also the business. Sharing best practices is another way, and until now already many administrations have put forward their initiative to help and share these best practices. I mentioned the existing WCO tools and instruments. However, we believe there are still gaps in which the WCO can do more, and we have already identified some areas that are key for, should I say, more research and developing new tools, and of course capacity building, which Erik has already said something about. This is a very simplified way of showing the potential economic effects of the ECP, as we call the Economic Competitiveness Package. What we see as a potential is by implementing WCO instruments and tools, and first of all, the Customs in the 21st Century strategy, but also the revised Kyoto Convention, as well as the Safe Framework of Standards as some of the key instruments of the WCO. The Customs administrations can contribute to improved border procedures. They can contribute to improved infrastructure, as well as to harmonized regional standards. This, in turn, will lead to reduction of trade costs and advantage for firms. It should I say, ideally lead to better exports, to more foreign investments, and then further on to job creation, as well as increased revenue collection. And we should have, after this, better economic growth, as well as reduction of poverty. This is what we call the ECP conceptual chart, which is actually not set in stone, and actually includes the many WCO instruments and tools and other measures that we believe can contribute to trade facilitation and in turn to economic competitiveness. You can see the revised Kyoto Convention is in the middle. This is considered to be like the basis of harmonized and simplified customs procedures, and we call it the Trade Facilitation Convention. However, it is also very important in the sense that it actually is the basis for all the provisions, or most of the provisions that are contained in the WTO Trade Facilitation negotiating text. So in that regard, it's also very important to accede to this convention. To this date, we have 82 contracting parties out of the 178 countries, and a little bit more than half of the SADC countries are contracting parties. Other than the revised Kyoto Convention, of course, we have many instruments and tools, of course. We can look into, for instance, globally networked customs, which we have already mentioned today, and which contributes greatly to interconnectivity. Implementing the single window, implementing the data model are also instruments and tools that can contribute to economic competitiveness. Of course, we can look into and try to implement more the risk management compendium. It can actually help very much in improving effective and efficient management of risks. But of course we have identified, and of course I would like to mention also the time release study, which is a very practical tool which is implemented by many administrations to measure performance, as well as to identify bottlenecks in cross-border movements. However, there are areas that have not been covered well enough. Some that have been identified is, for instance, informal trade, SMEs, transit, coordinated border management as well. We will have, for instance, at the next Permanent Technical Committee, a thorough discussion on coordinated border management. Also, there will be a discussion on the ECP altogether. We will have a whole day discussing this initiative. The Policy Commission and Council in June this year fully supported the initiative and the concept around the economic competitiveness package. They have also mandated the WCO to develop an action plan to incorporate the suggested elements to be implemented in that regard. I have already mentioned some of them. However, one of the ways of actually improving this action plan that is being drafted as we speak is collecting members' needs. Some we already heard at the mentioned meetings, but the WCO is at this point actually using some of these meetings, regional meetings, and reaching out to members, trying to identify which are the areas in your countries, in your regions that contribute more to economic competitiveness? Which are the areas that you think maybe need more attention and more, should I say, research perhaps to be carried out? So with that, I leave you, and I hope this is enough food for thought, and perhaps you will have some feedback on some of the suggestions that I have put out. Thank you.